Would like to introduce our main speaker, Bob D. from Las Vegas.
My name is Bob Darrell and I am alcoholic. And it's only through the grace of a God that I was afraid to believe in that I have access to maintain in my life through a process outlined in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the ability to remain sponsorable, and a persistent and consistent effort in trying to forget myself and help others, and consequently I haven't had a drink or any mind or emotion altering medication since October 31st, 1978. That's the miracle, great miracle in my life. Delighted to be here. I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. I just flew back from Ireland, so I'm like, some part of me is still over the Atlantic, I think. I'm just curious, who's here? How many people are here in their first less than a year sober? Wow. And you're at a traditions thing? Ooh, there's some tough sponsorship up here, I'm telling you. Wow. Well, I'm supposed to share my experience on the 12 traditions, which I got to tell you, when I wouldn't have come to a tradition. I would have had the flu if it was the traditions when I was new. I remember going to a 12 steps and 12 traditions study group, and if I went in and sat down and found out they were on the traditions, I would get up and find a reason to go across town to the other meeting, right? Because I'm so selfish and so self-obsessed. It's like traditions. I want to get to important stuff about me, stuff that has to do with me, and it'll make me feel better and give me relief. And traditions, they're like rules. I like that movie, Treasure of Sierra Madre. We don't need no stinking traditions, That's like my whole attitude towards it. And I had a sponsor who was a past delegate, and so he got me into general service, and I spent 9 years in general service, and the traditions started to come alive for me. And I was tasked, my second term as DCM, I was tasked to do a 2-hour service, 12 concepts and service manual study group every Sunday afternoon. That's a real crowd pleaser. And we'll know a loneliness such as few do. There'd be like 6 browbeaten people in there that didn't want to be there. But I learned a lot about Alcoholics Anonymous. And my experience is things like the traditions and the concepts and the history of AA didn't become important to me until I really fell in love with AA. And that took a while here. Because I'm so self-centered and self-involved and self-focused when I get here that my whole world is pretty much just me. And then as time went on, it became my group, and then it became the area, the district in the area, and then all of a sudden I felt amazed that I was part of something that was actually a worldwide fellowship of recovery called Alcoholics Anonymous. I tell you what I've found. This, I really, really believe this, and I try to put this through to the guys I sponsor. I think of everything Alcoholics Anonymous offers a guy like me. The practicing of the spiritual principles as a way of life, the 12 traditions, is the highest level we have here of spirituality. The 12 steps are good for personal relief, but they don't really solve the whole problem. They'll keep you physically sober, but they really don't. Because what is the real problem? Well, Why did I drink? I drank for unity. I drank because I'm the guy who secretly doesn't feel the way other people look. I drink because I have this seeming inability to connect with people the way they seem to easily connect with each other. I remember in grade school, this is before I ever found alcohol, before I ever got high, having these feelings of it's all of you and then there's me, in a state of separation. And my grad sponsor was a guy named Chuck Chamberlain, and Chamberlain used to say there was one problem and it contained all problems. And that problem was conscious and unconscious separation between me and God and me and you. That I live, the whole universe is over here and I'm over here. Separate and apart from. And there, when it says in our book that we will know a loneliness such as few do, it's the loneliness of separation. That I can't quite connect with life and people until I found alcohol. And when I found alcohol, I love what Wilson said in his story. He said, I was a part of life at last. When I found alcohol, all of a sudden I could, whatever that invisible yet impenetrable barrier between me and life itself and me and other people just seemed to dissolve away, and I could come out and play. When I found alcohol, I found something that would connect me with people with such a level of intimacy that was beyond me sober. I don't know if I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room that ever got about half drunk and would just say things like, I love you, man. I'll die for you, bro. You know, like, you and me, man. You know, like, I just feel like, ooh, I feel plugged in. And then you know what happens? I sober up and I'm back to being Bob again. You know, the lonely, separate, apart from guy. And I drank alcohol for unity. And then what happens to happen to me happens to so many of us, and it's really what brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1978. It was not the consequences of my drinking. And that was what was so baffling to me, because in the years I was in and out, I would hear these stories that seemed to imply if you hit a bad enough bottom, it was going to catapult you into the middle of AA. But I did not get into the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous because of consequences. I got there because of a lack of alternatives. Something horrible had happened to me that I did not understand what it was, and I couldn't live with it. And what had happened is alcohol stopped setting me free. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know what had happened to me. But the last couple years I drank, I was not part of the party anymore. I did not drink and get free. I did not drink and was able to get connected to people. I drank and felt depressed and even more lonely. I couldn't drink away the remorse from the people I'd hurt, trying to keep this thing going. Alcohol stopped working for me. And I was at that place it talks about in A Vision for You, where you go for years and you can't imagine life without it, and then you get to a place that's really bad. You can't imagine life with it. Not the way it's become at the end. And I couldn't change that. I couldn't roll it back. If I could have rolled it back to drink the way I drank when I was 18 or 20 years old, oh man, I'd have done that. I'd have done that regardless of the consequences. I mean, if a genie would have popped out of a bottle and said, hey, Bob, I'm going to let you drink the way you drank when you were 18 years old. I'll give you 6 months of that every year, but you're going to have to spend the other 6 months in jail. I would have went, okay. Yeah, good. I'm good with that. Good. Because the freedom I found in that was so amazing. And when that went away and bled out, and now I drink in patheticness, it was a bad deal. In 1978, I stood on a bridge trying to get up enough courage to kill myself, and I did not think it was alcoholism. If I could have been honest with someone about what I was really feeling, it felt like I was dying of loneliness. Because I don't fit anywhere drunk anymore, and I don't fit anywhere sober. I feel horrible and I can't do this anymore. And there's no relief anywhere, not even in the bottle. And that's a bad place to be at. And little did I know that would bring me to Alcoholics Anonymous the last time in 1978. And I started to get involved in the fellowship. And in the very beginning, I was in a group that was real big on 2 of the 3 legacies, as were a lot of groups back in the 70s, because there was not a big book consciousness yet. I remember the first time, it was late 1980, I heard a set of cassettes that came from the International, that Wesley Parrish had circulated around on Joe and Charlie. And my home group was a big book study group. And I'm listening to Joe and Charlie going, what book are they talking about? I had to look stuff. They talk about stuff, and it blew my mind. I thought, I never knew. And it started a big book consciousness in this country that now I think we went so far the other way. We got big book technicians now. We have people. We have 15 probably workbooks of people that are sober a while, and they need to really correct Wilson, because he didn't really. They want to show what he really meant and different things like that. So I was entrenched in 2 of the 3 legacies. My first sponsor had been a past delegate. He insisted I do 12-step work, hospitals and institutions, intergroup, general service. I was really into unity. I was a part of my home group, got there a half hour to an hour early, helped set up, had a job there, unity and service, and dabbling in recovery, as most of us did in those days. It was not uncommon to do your 4-step writing your life story, because nobody understood what it said in the book. Matter of fact, if you're ever tried to look at a 4th step and you're new and no one's helping you, it's like, I don't know who Mr. Brown is and Mrs. Jones. It's just, so we all did the same thing. We would write our life stories and then punish some sponsor with about 8 hours of just narcissistic, crap, until his eyes glazed over, and nothing really changed. But yet, I stayed sober on a lot of service and a lot of 12-step work. When Wilson says in working with others that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics, I'm alive today because of that. But it's only 2 legacies out of 3. And if you only do 2 legacies in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like a 2-legged stool. You can sit on it for a while, but it is a balancing act, I'm telling you. But 3 is solid. And I eventually put the 3rd legacy, recovery, as it was outlined in the book. And I'm not. That doesn't mean that I didn't do a 4th step. I did the life story. Doesn't mean I didn't make some amends. I made some amends. Sometimes when you're new, it doesn't matter whether you want to make amends. Some of them are coming at you. You know what I mean? Like the police, and some of it's just coming at you. And so I made some amends. I did all that. And what I started realizing is that even after being through the steps and taking a whole bunch of people through them, sponsoring a lot of guys, that there was still some kind of missing. And I felt myself at times suffering from what Wilson refers to as the pangs of anxious apartness. I think that's a pretty good description of the loneliness of disunity, this anxious apartness. And there's a paragraph in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. See if this fits any of you. If it does, don't be around any sharp objects. It said, and this is about our problem with relationships, and not just love relationships, period. The people you work with that you feel disconnected with. The people who live next door to you that you probably don't even know. The people you feel separate from. And it says, it is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist upon dominating the people we know, or we depend upon them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our own willful desires, well, they revolt and they resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, maybe a sense of persecution, a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts in control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. You know, we have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we tried to struggle to the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. First time I ever read that, I got sick to my stomach because it was me. Because it was me. And I was sober a long time. And I'd worked the steps. And I sponsored people. And I had a lot of commitments. And I was real involved in service. And it started to evolve in me that really the problem was still what our book says is the root of this separation that Chamberlain talks about, conscious and unconscious separation. And at the root of that is selfishness and self-centeredness. The book says that we think is the root of our troubles. See, the problem is I got too much of me between me and you. I got too much of me between me and God. And just because you're sober a long time doesn't mean that changes. I don't know if you've ever sat in a meeting and just, you're not really taking people's inventory. You're just noticing things about them. For some of us, it's a gift. And you just sit there and you just noticing, yeah, 4 cups of coffee, no money in the basket, just all that little stuff, right? And the thing is, when you think you're right, you don't know that you're selfish. One of the lines in chapter 5, I think, is brilliant, and it's funny, but if you're not awake enough, it's not funny. It says that we are extreme examples of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. What does that mean? It's not saying, Bob, Bob, you got a problem with self-will a little bit. No, it says you're an extreme example. The worst of humanity is here, and that's you way up there, Bob, right? Of what you want. Self-will, what I want. My way. My little plans and designs, as it says in chapter 5. Like the actor who wants to run the whole show is forever trying to arrange the lights, the scenery, the rest of the players in his own way. I'm that guy. And yet, what happens to me is I'm sober a long time, and I don't think I'm that guy anymore. Because it says we're extreme examples of self-will run riot, though we usually don't think so. I don't think so because I think I'm right. Right? I remember going to my sponsor in early sobriety, and he'd say these things to me. They'd just go over my head. I don't know what he's talking. He's just stupid. I'd report to him about the people that I work with and the people in AA that are out of line. And there's a lot, because I notice, I'm watching. And there's a lot of people that are out of line. And I would start talking about the guy selling Amway in the parking lot of the Thai Club and the 13th steppers, which I've just aggravated me. And he tried to imply that I was just jealous. I'm not jealous. The people that there were people just aggravated because when they shared, you could hear angel wings flapping in the background. You know? I just think, that's phony. They're not really like that. And I'd always dump it all on him, and he'd always say the same thing. He says, "You got to quit playing God." I think I'm not playing God. I'm reporting accurate information here. But I was playing God. And the ego, as Harry Tiebout talks about, it has amazing recuperative powers. And I got here, like some of us get here, surrendered by the bottle, in a state of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I went from the guy who'd been the counselor, the guy who knew everything, to knowing one thing when I got sober in 78. And I knew one thing for sure. I knew I didn't know. And then I started to become the guy who knew again, right? I started to unravel the surrender that had been produced by my own alcoholism. And what I started realizing is that I became a me first guy again. In other words, I'm not... You know, in our first tradition, it sort of gives you the pecking order here. And the pecking order is me last. Others first. It really, I think the divine pecking order is God first, you second, and me always last. But if you're like me, that sounds good. And that's the kind of thing you'd want to share in the meeting, because you want the bragging rights of a humble person. But it's really me first, me second, just me. It's just me. That's all it is. It's me. Now, I'll be kind, and I love that line in the book. It says, "We may be kind, considerate, even modest, and self-sacrificing in our effort to run the universe." Because I'm a me first guy who needs the bragging rights of a you first guy, right? I'm not humble, but I want to look humble, right? So it's like an art form to get all that going on. Kind of have the pretense of humility, the pretense of other-centeredness, when it's all about you. And it was all about me. And I just happened. It comes back, as Harry Tiebout says it. And he said that we must have ego reduction at depth. We must. Our lives depend upon it. I heard Chamberlain one time say, I only ever heard him say this once, but he said if it wasn't for ego, we wouldn't even need AA. But it's the monkey wrench in the machine. It's really the source of the problem. And so in the first tradition, I'm asked to put everybody else first before me, which is not an easy thing for a self-centered person. And how do you know you're that guy that's actually doing that? You have to look at your actions. One of the things that Wilson talks about in his story, he says that, and unless the alcoholic perfects and enlarges his spiritual life through two things, and it's not prayer meditation, through self-sacrifice and constant work for others and their needs. So am I willing to be inconvenienced? Am I willing to go out of my way? Am I willing to sacrifice and take the me first Bob and push me aside and make it look like through my actions, because that's all that's real, like Alcoholics Anonymous and helping people are first. One of the things that I started to realize, and it talks about this, and there's a couple things in tradition 2 that are amazing. First of all, it's tradition 2 distinguishes AA from every other organization on the planet. It's the only organization where you come in a big shot, and if you're lucky, work your way up to servant. Everywhere else, it's the other way around. You come in, you sweep the floor, someday you're the manager. In AA, the highest you get here is a self-forgetting servant. And this ultimate authority it talks about here, it touches on something that Carl Jung used to talk about when he talked about the collective unconscious. Jung had a lot of ways to talk about what we often think of as God and a lot of different phrases to use. But in our second tradition, it talks about a dynamic that everyone here gets. That when we come together, there's an ultimate authority in the mix who expresses itself through the consciousness of when we come together. You can feel it in a good Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. You can feel it. There's something in the room that's more than the sum of the parts. And it's a spirit. And I've been to meetings where it's so thick, it almost brings tears to your eyes. And then I've been to some other meetings that are so narcissistic that, you ever one of those meetings that starts off, does anybody have a problem? Somebody whines about something, and then 20 people try to solve their problems. And about halfway through the meeting, the new guy who had the problem can't take it anymore, bolts out of the meeting. And people are still, wait a minute, I have an answer to his problem. He's not even there anymore. And those are the kind of meetings, at the end of the meeting, I think, man, I need a meeting. Jesus, I need a meeting. Because all I found, I didn't find the ultimate authority in that meeting. All I found was a lot of Bob. And in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, God shows up. There's a covenant here. When two or more of us come together for the purpose of recovery, He will be in the midst. And God talks to guys like me. And I suppose if you're sober a while, He's talked to you in the meetings. Where you go to a meeting and you got some stuff going on, you don't even understand it, you don't know what to do, you're spinning, you're full of fear, it's half got you crazy, and there'll be strangers in the meeting talking about exactly what you need to hear at exactly the moment you need to hear it. Something is expressing itself through the consciousness of an Alcoholics Anonymous group. That's why when I go to meetings, I'm very reverent and respectful here. I don't text. I don't use my phone. I try not to I don't crosstalk. I try not to get up unless it's like a bathroom emergency. I just sit there, and I do that because even if I'm not getting, maybe I'm in the meeting and I'm too full of me to hear God, and that can happen. But maybe the guy sitting next to me, maybe he's desperate and God's trying to reach him, and I don't want to be the guy who gets in the way. I don't want to be the guy who's the distraction. And my selfishness thinks that I'm more important than anything. That's why I just try to respect that. I'm not more important than the thing that happens when we all come together. There's something very, very reverent and very sacred about what happens in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting where people are there for the purpose of recovery. In the late mid 1940s, AA was in a lot of trouble, and Bill Wilson wrote the tenets to ensure AA's future, which is now known as the long form. They read them at the beginning of the meeting, and some of you, especially if you were new, as they're reading that, I'm sure your eyes were glazing over because they're long. I mean, they just go on and on and on. And if you have the attention span of a gnat, they're about 10 minutes past your attention span. And we used to read them at my old home group, and I used to love to watch the newcomers. About when you get to about the 8th tradition in the long form, they're just going, make it stop. Right? I get that, because we want to get back to the important stuff about me. I want to get something to make me feel good, right? I don't want to hear this, this stuff just goes on. And Wilson, because they're long, he had a hard time. He couldn't even get groups to read them, right? I get it. And Alcoholics Anonymous is in a lot of trouble, and it's falling apart, and their group's dissolving, and there's some horrible stuff happening. And he doesn't know what to do. And there was a guy that Dr. Bob had taken through the steps from Chicago, a guy named Earl Treat. And Earl put together an abbreviated version of the 12 traditions, not the ones Wilson had created, an abbreviated version. And I suspect out of some level of frustration and a desperate need to get something in place, Wilson got on board with the short form, which is now known as the short form, and they were adopted. And I think we took a big hit when that happened. I'm a long form guy. I think Wilson was divinely inspired. Earl Treat, we're not so sure. Wilson he had that ability. Everyone who I've ever talked to that knew him always said the same thing. He had the vision. He had that ability to access something. And when we went to the short form, we lost a lot of things. And one of the places we really lost something was in the third tradition. Everyone knows the third tradition in the short form. It defines our membership requirement. It says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. That was not Wilson's original. Originally, Wilson said our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. There's a big difference to me between having a desire not to drink and suffering from alcoholism. I'm an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I suffer from alcoholism. Now, when I'm involved I'm working the steps, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I don't know I'm suffering. You don't know I'm suffering. Matter of fact, I feel I'm doing really well. Contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Doing really well. But if I back off on some of that stuff and I'm having a spiritual bad hair day, I'm not doing so good. And if you're around me, you're probably not doing so good either. Because I don't like to suffer alone. I'm a sharer. But I can suffer from alcoholism in sobriety. I'm not a problem drinker. I don't have acute alcoholism. I have chronic alcoholism, which means for all practical purposes, the suffering begins where the medication ends. And in a state of abstinence, I seem to have an abnormal reaction to that. I'm prone to restless, irritable discontent. I'm prone to depression. I'm prone to feelings of anxious apartness. Everything that it talks about in our literature is a pretty good description of Bob once you take the alcohol away from me. And so I'm an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I suffer from alcoholism. In our fourth tradition, it gives us freedom for autonomy. Do you know, I had owned a chain of stores at one time, and I had a lot of employees, and I ran my company on the 12 traditions, even though my employees were not in AA, and they didn't even know what the 12 traditions were, but they understood the principles. They understood the importance of unity, that the common welfare should come first. They understood the concept of a group conscience, that all of us together are smarter than anyone singly, even me as the owner. That the group conscience was smart. We had autonomy. Every manager was given, just as every group in Alcoholics Anonymous is given autonomy, the right to do pretty much anything they want to do to run their own show, as long as it doesn't negatively impact the whole company, or in our case, other groups or Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. The thing about freedom, and autonomy gives us such a tremendous amount of freedom, but freedom without responsibility, or freedom for those that aren't awake, becomes like anarchy. So what the hope is that we have the freedom, but we're awake enough to see what our actions speak to the rest of the world. So I don't do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous that reflects badly on AA. And that's where I can do pretty much anything I want as long as it doesn't reflect badly on AA. And my sponsor, he is a stickler for that. He can be one of the kindest men in the world, and yet if you do something that reflects badly on AA, he's terrible. I mean, he's just mean almost, because he's right. And I think there's a high level of awakening just to realize that everything you do in and out of these rooms is your vote for the other people. Because especially if you're sober a number of years, you may not want the position of being a person that the newer people look up to and to how to run their life and act sober, but you are. So everything we do. So if I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I come to a meeting and I come in 10 minutes late, aren't I really saying to the newer people, hey, so it's my vote that it's okay, you should all do that. If I get on my phone in a meeting, isn't it my vote for everybody that I think it's all right for? Because if it's okay for me, I think it's okay for you. Everything I do in Alcoholics Anonymous speaks something. But you got to be kind of awake to get that. What does your actions say to the other people that are here? And so autonomy is coupled with a hopefully an awakened sense of responsibility. I can do anything I want, but I'm responsible here. One of the traditions that slipped me up, this primary purpose. Something happened to me in my sobriety. I got successful. And in this 10th step, there's a cautionary paragraph in there. When it says it's easy to let up on this spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. And I think what happens to some of us is we get seduced into a false sense of okayness, which comes with some entitlement by the very fruits of our sobriety. And I became successful, and with that, all of a sudden there was this slow, incremental shift away from my purpose in life being to help others into my purpose in life was me. And I didn't even know that was happening to me until when I was about 19 years sober. And when I was 19 years sober, I think that was one of the top years. I probably made more money that year than I'll ever make again the rest of my life. And I sunk into a deep depression, and I had everything. I ran out of stuff to buy. I had 3 fancy cars, 2 motorcycles. I just had everything. I'd spent a fortune on jewelry and artwork just because I had the money. I don't know, it was stupid stuff. And the more I accumulated, the more depressed I started to become. And it was crazy to me, because you'd think if I was going to be depressed, it should have been in my early years of sobriety when I had nothing and I was just off the streets. And yet it came at a time when I should have been at my happiest and I was at my worst. And I didn't know what had happened to me. And I went to a meeting, and a guy told this guy, it said, I was just depressed. It scared me, scary depressed. And he said to me, you still go to meetings and you sponsor some people and you run your mouth a lot. He said, but I don't think your primary purpose is helping others anymore. I think your primary purpose is you. And it cut me. It pierced me. I didn't like it, but I knew what he was saying was true, because my life was all about my stuff, my feelings, my well-being. I wanted the bragging rights of a good member of AA, but my heart wasn't in it. I would go through the motions, but I became a terrible sponsor. I was the kind of sponsor, if some guy called me up and had a lot of problems, I'd go, yeah, come on, let's stop, get this over with so I can get back to the important stuff, me and my life. And I was horrible. And that guy snapped me out of that, and within a couple days, I had my car full of new guys again, and I'm hitting the halfway houses and going to a detox meeting almost every day, and I'm just on fire again. And I here's the crazy part. I didn't know that I had lost my way. I didn't know that I filled up with me. Because, Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of self-abandonment and service, and you go through the steps and you take these actions, and my very being is like the back of a toilet tank. You work the steps and it like flushes it, and it just empties out. And then, unbeknownst to me, I automatically start filling up with me again. I just start doing it. And I don't even know I'm doing it. And that's, I think, touches the chronic nature of alcoholism. In the sixth tradition, talks about endorsement. I'm involved in a couple conferences, and I'm also involved in my home group. We're one of the few meetings in the world that flies in a convention speaker. Now we're doing it every single Monday night and 2 Fridays a month. So we're doing it like 6 times a month. And in the conferences I'm involved in, we have gone out of, we will not have a speaker that has another agenda. If you've written a book, good for you. But we're not going to give you our podium to sell your book. If you are a paid professional and you are a sober coach or something, good for you. But we're not going to give you a vehicle to get more clients. We're not going to do it. So, because we don't want to imply endorsement of that. It's fine for you to do it. As Tom Ivester was a dear friend and a great mentor, he said, we must stand for something even though we stand against no one. So I have to, as a guy who helps pick speakers sometimes, I have to think about that. Am I getting a speaker that is trying to sell something here? Is he trying to profit from something here? And if he is, then that's fine. That's your business. But I'm not going to imply that my group or the conferences I'm involved in are endorsement to that. I've been to AA conventions that I was at one not a couple years ago. They had yoga on the agenda. I thought, well, if you're going to do that, you should have a workshop with the rosary, and you should have another one with, we don't endorse any, not that there's anything wrong with any of that stuff. It's just that Alcoholics Anonymous can't imply any kind of endorsement of that stuff. So we don't. Tradition number 7, fully self-supporting. I thought one of the first directions I got in Alcoholics Anonymous was get a job. Jeez. Get it. I had a chance to, I remember I had a chance to collect unemployment. I could have taken home $120 a week, early sobriety. My sponsor made me go to work for 40 hours a week for $97. And I thought, that's the craziest thing. But he knew something. He knew that I can't be a taker here. I have to be fully self-supporting through my own voluntary contributions. And I think about this. I usually put my home group on Monday nights. I put the price of a expensive drink in a cocktail lounge in the basket, $20, because that's about what a Red Bull and Grey Goose will cost you in a nice cocktail lounge. And most other meetings, if it's not my home group, I'll put $5 in. And I think the norm had always been to put in the price, at least put in the price of a cocktail. But I got cheap when I got sober. And it's really fear. It's fear of financial insecurity. I was at a meeting at one of the clubs, and they had a cigarette machine there, and I went over and I bought a pack of cigarettes, and then when the basket came by, I didn't put any money in the basket, and the guy had saw that I had money. Oh, he just embarrassed me. Oh my God, he called me names, selfish. You got money in your pocket, you just got paid, and you wouldn't even put a quarter in the bag. Oh, he just never did that again. But he was right. You know, he was right, because I'm more about me and my money, that I don't want to be a supportive part of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I get to vote through the basket sometimes, that I want to be a part of it. I like what's going on here. I'm going to jump to tradition 10. I don't think 9's a big issue that we'll never be organized. There's no chance of that. I mean, it's like we're like herding mosquitoes trying to organize that. But this 10th tradition touches something very, very deep within me. This having no opinion on outside issues. Outside of what? I think it's out, in me personally, outside my own experience. You can measure the distance from the decision in step 3. You can measure how much ego I got going on at any given time by the amount of opinions in my life. It's the opinions and the judgments that seem to separate me from life, and me from God, and me from you. It is the source. And if I could imagine what it would be like if you could go through life with no opinion on anything. See, just the thought of that, some of you are squirming around a little bit. Your ego doesn't like that. No, wait a minute. Because I aggrandize myself with my opinions, right? I aggrandize myself. I like to be opinionated so people will know that I know stuff, right? And I don't know anything. If I could be without opinions, I think I would truly be and remain surrendered. And I just have experience. It may not be your experience. That's okay. I'll share it with you. If it helps you, that's good. If it doesn't, there's other people that have experience too. That's all I got. And it's all that I have that's real, is my experience. And if I could live like that, and I get little spurts of it. There's a tremendous freedom in being judgment and opinionless. Tremendous freedom. Tradition 12, anonymity is our spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. I'm embarrassed to tell you I was probably 20 years sober before I understood what that meant. Here's what I thought it meant my first 20 years. I thought it meant, well, because I've noticed that there are some difficult personalities in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to have to put these spiritual principles before your terrible, stupid personalities. And you know what it really means? There's only one personality that I have to put the principles before, and that's me. I am the seat of my judgment. I am the seat of my conflict. I am the seat of all my separation. I am the problem. And I put these principles before my egocentric, self-serving, self-grandizing personality. And there's a line in the book, one of the guys says in there that he found that spiritual principles would solve all his problems. Can I put these principles before my personality, which is really a tremendous surrender? To know that I don't know, and to know that and serve something other than myself, to serve a set of principles, a purpose, and ultimately a power greater than myself. I think that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. It's about self-abandonment and service. I have spent years trying to wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world by managing the best, the very best, and the hardest I possibly could. And the end result in 1978, as I stood on a bridge trying to take my own life. A complete failure at wresting happiness and satisfaction out of this world. And so I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I get a sponsor who does not respect my feelings. And I get a home group who asks a lot of me. And they ask me to be inconvenienced on a regular basis. And I start this journey. And it's a journey away from Bob, and where my primary purpose is eventually, hopefully, and maybe most of the time, no longer me. Some days it is. When my primary purpose is Bob, that is not a good day. When my primary purpose is helping God's kids, that's a good day. In Milton's Paradise Lost, as Lucifer was casting himself out of heaven, he's shaking his fist at God and the angels in heaven. He says, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. And those of us that have reigned, we know it's hell. And those of us that have served, we know it's heaven. To forget myself, and as Chamberlain used to say, I am no longer my business. That's God's. I am God's business. My business is to help his kids. And just to the extent that I can take that position, my life is really, really good. Thank you for listening. Will you tell me when this is over, too? So, all right, I got some questions in this basket. Now, I don't have answers. But if I have some experience that touches with the question, I'll give it to you. It may not help you, I don't know. Or you may just get a dumb look at some of these questions. What's one thing you most hold dear in your life? Somebody asked me that a while ago. If I could tell you one thing that I got from Alcoholics Anonymous that I value the most, what would it be? And I would tell you it's the ability to laugh at myself. Humor, having a sense of humor is amazing. See, when I got sober, I didn't have a sense of humor. Self-obsessed people, nothing's funny. It's a life serious. I remember looking at people that were just smiling and happy and laughing a lot, and I just remember thinking, I'd have to lose 30 IQ points to be like that. The only reason they're happy is they're stupid. They could see the problems in life that I can see, they wouldn't be so happy. I was the guy that was stupid. Life is the most beautiful romantic comedy that's ever been written by the greatest writer of any that ever existed. How can I apply tradition 4 to my relationship? Well, if you go the long form, I think autonomy in a relationship works really well if you know that the relationship comes first. And then to serve that end, you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do in that context. But you don't come first. And that's a hard thing. This principle of autonomy, when other people are involved, is you can't be autonomous without an other-centered awareness and an awareness of the whole. That's like in my business. We had autonomy, but we also had a consciousness of the company. And we had a consciousness of the other employees in order to be autonomous. Do I have to finish all the steps? Yeah, you really mean 9, don't you? You're really talking about step 9, aren't you? Yeah. No, only if you want to stay sober. That's all. I mean, what is your favorite tradition, and why is it your favorite? I think the one I just talked about. No opinion on outside. That's my favorite because I struggle with it so much. It's the one that I aspire to be more in line with, and it's also the one I have the most difficulty with. How do you practice principles over personalities? I love that line in the prayer of St. Francis where it talks about it's in self-forgetting that we find. I think Alcoholics Anonymous is a program of self-forgetting. That it's pushing myself aside and putting principles and a purpose to help others and God and the whole thing before me, which is hard for a me first person. Do you think the newcomer is the most important person in the room? I don't know. I'm sure he thinks so. How do you explain, this is a good question. How do you explain to someone why speakers are reimbursed for their mileage, their airfare, etc., when they keep saying that their speakers should do it for free? Well, it's a really good reason. Alcoholics Anonymous must be self-supporting through its own contributions, and what that means is we pay our own way here. If you choose to have a speaker come a long distance and it costs them, let's say, $500 out of their pocket for a hotel and an airfare, etc., and you're not willing to reimburse them, then what you're asking them to do is to make a personal contribution of about $500 to your group, which there's a lot of people that would do that in AA, that are very grateful for their sobriety. Here's the problem with that. You end up where only the rich get to participate in that level. Do you want that kind of Alcoholics Anonymous? Right. Neither do I. I think AA has to be fair across the board, that someone who lives on Social Security should have the same ability to participate and go to a conference to speak as someone who makes $1 million a year. It should be equal. Money's not the object here. It's equanimity. We should all be on the same level here. Should Alano clubs have TVs and places for people to play cards? I have no idea. If you were watching TV while you're playing cards with me, you're going to lose. I don't even play cards. Should donuts and chips be paid for from the seventh tradition basket or separately? This is an autonomy question. Groups have the ability to make those kind of decisions on their own. I've seen groups spend money on silly stuff, but as long as it doesn't negatively impact AA. If they want to spend on a pool party, groups do that. They have the ability and the right to make those decisions, to run their own ship. We were just in Ireland. Oh my God, in Ireland, they're so paranoid over there that everything's against the traditions. Everything's against the traditions. And it's by people who don't understand the traditions. If the General Service Office is not self-supporting, should it close in order to honor our seventh tradition? I don't even think that's the question. If it's not self-supporting and they can't pay their bills, they're probably going to close. That's just cause and effect. And I think we have a responsibility to support them. My home group sends them money. Most entities in AA that are really in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous with a consciousness of our service structure support the different entities. Of course they do, because they realize the importance of places that disseminate literature and phone services and all the things that are vital to us and to us, our ability to carry the message. And that's really everything in Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to serve that end. And that's it. Alano clubs, is there an unspoken affiliation that these clubs have with AA? Well, if you look at the long form of the tradition, clubs are necessary, I guess. I don't know. I don't think they're against the traditions unless they try to call themselves an AA group. I don't think they're against the traditions. Based on the long form of the traditions 11 and 12, which state there is never a need to praise ourselves and we are actually to practice a genuine humility, do you think posting sobriety anniversaries on social media violates the traditions? I don't know. If you say you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous on social media, I think you're violating the traditions. If someone says, in technicality, if someone says, I'm sober 10 years, is that a violation of the tradition? Not technically. Does it push the envelope a little bit? Maybe. I don't know. But I'll tell you what I think is really, I think self-promotion sometimes is weird. I've been involved in a lot of conferences over years. Do you know there are people who volunteer to speak? There are people who send CDs of themselves to conventions around the country and post their own talks on like YouTube. And I think if selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our trouble, self-promotion has got to be like arming ISIS or something. No, really. When you think about it, and here, I'll tell you, I struggle with this. People take talks of mine without my permission and throw them online all the time. Well, the problem I have with that, and I run into people all over, so help me so much. And that couple of people said that to me tonight. They listened to something that somebody else, I didn't put it online. I got it. My sponsor would kill me if I did something like that. But they don't bleep out the last name. And so in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, in general service, I learned that as Dr. Bob said, it's just as much a breach of the tradition to try to withhold myself secretly in here as it would be to go publicly and try to proclaim myself as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I as a lot of people, and there's a lot of speakers that have the same dilemma. My sponsor is one of them. I'll be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is fellowship level. This is not public level. And I will give my last name. That's perfectly all right. But what happens is people, without any consideration, will take you and put you on the internet without bleeping out your last name. It's like that old Ron White joke where he's in this bar and he's really drunk and he gets in a beef with the bouncer and they throw him out of the bar, and right outside the bar the police are there and they arrest him for being drunk in public. He said, I wasn't drunk in public, I was drunk in a bar. They threw me into public, arrest them. Well, that's what I feel like. They're throwing us into public without any consideration. And I talked to my sponsor about it. He doesn't know what to do about it. Except we both came to a conclusion I don't know that we can do. I mean, it's going to take some re-education of not saying our last name in AA meetings anymore just on the chance that it's recorded and somebody throws it online. But I'll tell you, now that sounds like a simple little thing. I've been giving my last name in meetings for almost 40 years. It sounds like a simple thing. I'm an everyday, I go to probably 8 meetings a week. This is going to be a major re-education for me to not do that because it's so knee-jerk for me. It's almost automatic. And I think I'm going to have to try to make an effort to do that, I guess. I don't know what else to do. You know? Is there a reason for those to be a non-alcoholic on the General Service Board today? Oh, I don't want to go there. I would answer that question, but I would be breaking the 10th tradition. Kent knows what I'm talking about, too. How and when did you apply Tradition 7 in your personal life and start seeing real freedom? Right away. You know, a couple of things I started doing that's been very important for me is I pay my bills early. And I pay my bills early because I was so irresponsible that I'm trying to go the other way, you know, and try to be. I want to be everything in sobriety. I want to be everything that I wasn't before I got here, and even in early sobriety, I wasn't very responsible. You guys taught me financial responsibility. I didn't have it when I got here. I was a taker. I was a user of people. Why? Okay, another question. Why do people still keep their cell phones on even after the announcement? Okay, I'm not going to even answer that one. What is the hardest tradition to follow? I think it's 10. I think it's 10. Are there assigned seats at meetings? What should you say to an old timer who arrives 10 minutes before the meeting and tells you it's his or her seat? I carry a couple thumbtacks in my pocket. No. I don't know. You know, there's groups that... In my home group, we try to limit the ability to save seats. But people do it. And there's no policing of that. And I've been to meetings. There's a group I love in Southern California, but there's no seats. There's a little tiny row in the back that if you're a visitor or a new person, you're back there because every member of the group has their own little chair. And, well, it's a strong group. It's a very strong group. Maybe they need a bigger facility to accommodate more people. My home group, we have seats available. But if you don't get there early, you're not going to get one up front unless you have a service position. We have certain seats reserved for the chairman of the meeting, the speakers, you know, those kind of things, because they have to be up front in order to get up and down the podium. But I don't know. I don't know. Does your home group contribute to GSO in New York? Yes. And why? Because we're an AA group. Is there a difference between customs and traditions? Yes. We have a lot of customs in my home group. There's no enforcement of traditions and there's no enforcement of customs, but we have customs. If you're a speaker at my home group, if you're a chairperson, if you're a 10-minute speaker even, you dress up. And we do that out of respect and reverence for Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know the nice thing about that, we're in a pretty big church, and the minister came up to us and he said, I just love the fact that so many people in your group, not everybody, probably a third of the group maybe dresses up, maybe, if that, maybe not even that, maybe a fourth. But he said, I just love that. He said, our society's become so self-indulgent, they don't come to church dressed up anymore. And we have become very self-indulgent, haven't we? There's not much respect anymore. I wear a coat and tie to my home group Monday nights because I'm a greeter, and I do the anniversaries. But I do it even without a position or a commitment that involves me getting up. You know why I do it? Because I don't want to do it. I do it because it's 115 degrees out, and it's going to be uncomfortable to put a coat and tie on. But what can I do to say, Alcoholics Anonymous, I love you, and I want to show you by being inconvenienced? There's not a lot I can do for AA. So little things like that, I'm in. I'm in. You don't have to twist my arm. I love AA. Which tradition is the most difficult? That's in here about 5 times. Why did the writer of the short form of the 12 traditions want to expand or elaborate? Why short? Actually, it's only tradition 2. Tradition number 2 is actually longer in the short form, that's some kind of alcoholic rightness about that. I don't know, but what I think it was is I don't know how to check this historically. I'm sure there's people that could there's some people that are very knowledgeable about the history. But I often wonder if Treat wasn't making a statement at Bill Wilson. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. Bill. I don't know that he said that's the intention, but I often suspected that because he was sort of a different camp in AA. He was from the Clarence. He was kind of connected to Clarence Snyder and those guys, and they were not happy with. Clarence did not like Wilson, which makes me like Wilson even more. What exactly is crosstalk, and why is it a problem? Which tradition does it affect? No, that could be a joke, but I'm not going to go there. I think it's tradition number 2. I think if you really believe that there's something in the room that helps all of us when we need it, and that power is God, then if you're cross-talking in a meeting, you may be interfering with someone's ability to hear that. I don't want to do that. There have been times in my sobriety when I have been in a lot of trouble, emotionally and mentally. And I don't know I can't see what's going on because it's right here and it's on me and I can't see. And I'll go to a meeting and I know it's God talks to me in the meeting through some stranger to tell me, and I'll get to hear exactly what I need to hear that'll pull my head up out of my butt so I can get back in line again. Because and we all have days like that. There are days when you call your sponsor and your sponsor's voice is like Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. And you can't pray. You start to pray, especially if you have a deep resentment. Start to pray, oh God, I hope they die in a fiery grave. No. And I'll go to a meeting and there'll be a guy in the meeting talking about the same difficulties I'm having. I think that's the power we have here, is that we can go inside ourselves to a place of genuineness and talk about ourselves openly in a way that there's somebody in the room, and we don't even know who they are, that's suffering from what I'm going through, and we help each other. Or maybe I went through it 2 weeks ago, and now it's clear enough within me I can finally talk about it, and there's a guy in the room that's in the middle of it, in my experience, is saving his life. Who knows? Thanks for listening.